The apartment went dark at exactly 9:17 p.m. Not dim, not flickering, not slowly fading into shadow. One quiet click echoed from somewhere inside the walls, and then every light disappeared at once. The steady hum of the refrigerator died away. The microwave clock vanished. The small fan beside the couch slowed until it stopped completely. For a heartbeat, the silence felt louder than any sound Savannah Brooks had ever heard. She stood motionless in the middle of her tiny Queens apartment, one hand resting on the kitchen counter as darkness swallowed the room. Only the pale glow from the street outside slipped through the thin curtains, barely enough to outline the worn furniture she had carefully kept clean despite years of use. From the bedroom came a soft cry. Then another. 4-month-old Noah was awake. Savannah closed her eyes for a moment. "Please, not tonight," she whispered. She already knew what had happened. She did not need to check the fuse box. She did not need to call the landlord. The electricity had been disconnected because she had chosen rent over the power bill. Again. Her phone lit up the darkness as she unlocked it with trembling fingers. The banking app loaded slowly before revealing the number she had memorized days ago. $1,243. To anyone else, it might have looked like enough. To Savannah, it represented everything already promised to someone else. Rent, hospital payments from Noah's complicated birth, prescriptions, bus fare to work, diapers. There was nothing left over. Noah's cry became louder. Not impatient. Hungry. Savannah hurried into the kitchen and reached for the nearly empty can of prescribed hypoallergenic formula sitting beside the sink. She turned it upside down and tapped the bottom gently. One tiny cloud of powder drifted into the bottle. Then nothing. She tapped harder. Another few grains fell like dry sand. Empty. Her shoulders sank. She pressed her lips tightly together, refusing to let herself cry before her son did. Noah deserved a mother who solved problems, not one who collapsed beneath them. Ever since Cole had walked away before Noah was born, life had become an endless series of impossible choices. Every week another bill arrived. Every month another promise had to be delayed. She worked every shift the pharmacy could offer after maternity leave, skipped meals without mentioning it, and sold almost everything that held sentimental value. First her grandmother's bracelet. Then her mother's earrings. Finally the little gold necklace she had promised herself she would give to Noah one day if he ever had a sister. There was nothing left to sell. She had already asked her manager for an advance. Already borrowed from the only neighbor she trusted. Already ignored 3 final hospital notices lying unopened beside the coffee mug on the table. There was nobody left. Except one number. Savannah opened her messages. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Asking for help always felt heavier than carrying the problem alone. She hated it, but pride could not feed a hungry baby. She typed carefully. "Hey, I'm so sorry to ask. Could I borrow $50 for baby formula? I'll pay you back Friday." She stared at the message, then pressed send before she could change her mind. A second later, her stomach tightened. She looked more carefully at the contact. Her breath caught. That was not her cousin's number. It was not the friend she meant to message. Somehow months earlier, she had saved the wrong contact beneath an old name. No, the word escaped in a whisper. She had just begged a complete stranger for money. Before she could decide whether to apologize, 3 small dots appeared on the screen. Someone was typing. Her heart pounded so loudly, she barely heard Noah crying again. The reply arrived. "Who is this?" Savannah stared at the words. She could invent a story. Pretend it was a joke. Simply block the number. Instead, exhaustion told the truth that pride never would. She typed slowly. A mother who made a mistake. She set the phone on the counter. Minutes passed. 1, 2, 5. Outside, traffic rolled through Queens as though nothing had happened. Somewhere downstairs, a television laughed behind someone else's wall. Life continued while her apartment remained dark. She lifted Noah into her arms, gently rocking him against her shoulder. "I know," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart." His tiny fingers wrapped around her sweater. He trusted her completely. That trust hurt more than the darkness. Her phone vibrated. She looked down. Only one sentence filled the screen. "Send me your address." Every warning she had ever heard echoed through her mind. Never give strangers your location. Never open your door after dark. Never trust someone you cannot see. Especially not in Queens. Especially not when the hallway light had been broken for weeks. She looked down at Noah. His cries had grown quieter. She knew that silence. Babies became quieter when hunger drained their strength. That frightened her more than any stranger ever could. Slowly she typed her address. Apartments 3B. After a moment she added another message. "You don't have to come, I only needed the money." The reply appeared almost instantly. "I'm already nearby." Savannah frowned. Nearby. She walked carefully to the window and pulled the curtain aside only enough to look outside. The street was almost empty. Then headlights appeared around the corner. Black armored Mercedes rolled slowly onto her block with the quiet confidence of a vehicle that belonged somewhere far more powerful than this neighborhood. Its windows were dark. Its body reflected the weak streetlight like polished stone. It stopped directly beneath the only working lamp outside her building. The engine remained running. Nobody got out immediately. Savannah's pulse quickened. Who was this? Why had he actually come? Her phone vibrated one final time. "I'm outside." Before she could move, 3 slow knocks echoed through the apartment. Not impatient. Not threatening. Just steady. Savannah tightened her hold on Noah as she walked silently toward the door. On the other side of it, a complete stranger stood in the dark hallway. And instead of bringing cash, he had brought baby formula. Savannah kept one hand on the chain lock while holding Noah close against her shoulder with the other. The hallway beyond the narrow opening remained dim, illuminated only by a failing ceiling bulb that buzzed every few seconds. The stranger made no attempt to push the door wider. He simply waited with remarkable patience, standing far enough back that she would never mistake his presence for a threat. In one hand, he carried 2 sealed cans of the exact hypoallergenic formula Noah needed. In the other rested a compact emergency power station, beside a paper grocery bag filled with bottled water, baby wipes, infant medicine, fresh bread, milk, fruit, and batteries. There were no bodyguards crowding the hallway, no display of wealth, only a quiet confidence that somehow made the silence even heavier. "Before I open this door," Savannah said carefully, "tell me why you're really here." The man's steady eyes never left hers. "Because hungry children shouldn't have to wait for adults to solve their problems," he answered. There was no rehearsed kindness in his voice, no attempt to impress her. It sounded like a principle he had lived by for years. "And because you asked for $50 when anyone trying to deceive me would have asked for 50,000. Those words unsettled her more than anything else. He had measured her request, understood it, and judged her honesty from the size of her desperation. Noah whimpered softly, and the stranger's attention shifted immediately to the baby, not with curiosity but with concern. "He's hungry," he said quietly. "Please don't let pride delay his next bottle." Savannah slowly removed the chain but kept one hand firmly on the door. The stranger entered only after she stepped aside, wiping his polished shoes carefully on the worn mat, as though he were entering someone's treasured home rather than a struggling apartment. He placed every item neatly on the kitchen counter before lifting the power station onto the floor beside the silent refrigerator. Within seconds, the low hum of electricity returned, filling the apartment with a sound so ordinary that it almost brought tears to Savannah's eyes. The refrigerator came back to life, and the tiny kitchen no longer felt abandoned by the world. While she prepared the bottle, the man deliberately turned away, giving her privacy during one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. Only after Noah began drinking peacefully did he allow himself to look back. He reached into the inside pocket of his dark overcoat and placed a simple white business card on the counter. "My name is Harrison Blake," he said calmly. "If you ever need help protecting your son, call the number on that card. If you only need money, don't." Savannah frowned. "What does that mean?" Harrison met her eyes without hesitation. "Money disappears. Protection changes futures." Before she could ask another question, headlights swept across the apartment ceiling from outside. Through the window, 3 black luxury vehicles rolled silently onto the street and stopped behind the armored Mercedes. Men in tailored suits stepped out, scanning every rooftop and every parked car with disciplined precision before one of them quietly touched an earpiece and nodded toward the building. Savannah's heart froze. This stranger had not come alone. Whoever Harrison Blake truly was, an entire empire had just arrived beneath her window. Harrison did not look toward the window when the convoy arrived. He did not acknowledge the men outside or the discreet movements behind the tinted glass. Instead, he watched Noah finish his bottle with the quiet attention of someone who understood that a hungry child mattered more than an empire waiting on the street below. When the baby finally relaxed against Savannah's shoulder, Harrison gave a single satisfied nod, as though the most important task of his evening had just been completed. Only then did he straighten his coat. "Your refrigerator will stay powered for several hours," he said calmly, "long enough for the electricity company to restore service tomorrow if the balance is cleared." Savannah stared at him in disbelief. "How do you know they'll restore it tomorrow?" A faint smile crossed his face. "Because they already received payment." Her eyes widened. "I never asked you to pay my bill." His expression remained steady. "No, you asked for formula. I decided the formula deserved a refrigerator." Before she could protest, one of the suited men knocked softly on the apartment door. Harrison opened it only a few inches. No words were exchanged. The man handed him a slim black folder before stepping back into the hallway. Harrison glanced through several pages, his expression unreadable, then quietly closed the folder. "I have to leave," he said. "Someone else has decided to make tonight more complicated than it needed to be." Savannah felt unease settle in her chest. "What does that mean?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "It means someone has been watching this building for longer than I have." Without another explanation, he slipped the folder beneath his arm and walked into the hallway. Seconds later, the apartment fell silent again, except for the distant sound of engines disappearing into the night. Sleep refused to come. Savannah kept replaying every word Harrison had spoken while Noah rested peacefully beside her, finally warm and full. Shortly after sunrise, loud voices drifted through the open window. Curious, she looked outside and froze. Neighbors stood gathered on the pavement pointing at fresh tire marks left by the convoy. Several held their phones, scrolling through photographs taken during the night. One woman excitedly claimed she had recognized the armored Mercedes from a business magazine featuring one of New York's most mysterious billionaires. Another insisted the vehicles belonged to a private security company protecting politicians. Within hours, blurry photographs spread across local community pages, each post adding another invented story. Nobody knew why the convoy had visited a struggling apartment building, but everyone wanted to guess. Across the city, inside a luxury penthouse overlooking the East River, Cole Bennett nearly dropped his coffee when those same photographs appeared on his phone. He zoomed in until the license plate became almost clear. Then his attention shifted to the apartment number mentioned in the comments. Apartment 3B, Savannah's apartment. The woman he had abandoned 4 months earlier was suddenly connected to one of the most untouchable men in New York. His surprise quickly faded into calculation. He opened an encrypted messaging app and sent only one sentence to an unknown contact. "Find out why Harrison Blake visited Savannah Brooks." The reply came less than a minute later. "Careful. Men who investigate Harrison Blake usually disappear from conversations long before they disappear from records." Cole leaned back slowly, smiling instead of feeling afraid. If a billionaire mafia boss had entered Savannah's life, then somewhere inside that impossible coincidence, he saw the opportunity that could make him richer than he had ever imagined. Cole Bennett had always mistaken patience for weakness. By sunrise, he had already convinced himself that Savannah's life had changed because she had found someone richer than him, not because she had survived without him. He spent the morning inside his sleek downtown office, ignoring unanswered emails from investors, while every screen displayed the same photograph of the black armored Mercedes parked beneath the streetlight outside apartment 3B. To everyone else, it was just another luxury car. To Cole, it was an open vault waiting for the right key. He contacted private investigators, financial brokers, and old associates who owed him favors, but every search returned the same unsettling conclusion. Harrison Blake officially owned shipping companies, hotels, logistics firms, construction groups, and investment holdings worth billions. Unofficially, nobody dared finish the sentence. The silence surrounding his name was more frightening than any rumor. While Cole chased information, Harrison sat inside the highest floor of Blake Holdings, a tower where glass walls overlooked the entire city. The conference room remained silent as intelligence reports appeared one after another across the polished table. Security footage from Queens, online discussions about the midnight visit, vehicle tracking reports, photographs uploaded by curious neighbors. Harrison closed each file with the same calm expression until the final report appeared. It contained Cole Bennett's name beside a growing list of financial disputes, misleading investor statements, and recent communications suggesting he was searching aggressively for connections to Blake Holdings. Harrison rested his hands together without visible emotion. "He isn't looking for me," he said quietly. "He's looking for leverage." Every executive in the room understood exactly what that meant. One advisor suggested sending security teams to discourage further interference. Another proposed purchasing Cole's company and ending the problem before it reached Savannah. Harrison rejected both ideas immediately. "Fear creates victims," he said. "Evidence creates consequences. Every decision we make from this moment must survive a courtroom." Unaware of the discussion unfolding across the river, Savannah arrived home after another exhausting shift carrying Noah asleep against her chest. For the first time in weeks, the apartment lights welcomed her instead of darkness, yet peace lasted only seconds. A thick certified envelope rested against her door. Her pulse quickened before she even picked it up. Inside were legal documents bearing Cole's name, petition for shared custody, request for primary placement. Supporting statement alleging unstable living conditions, financial uncertainty, and concerns about the child's long-term welfare. Every sentence felt carefully written to transform months of sacrifice into evidence against her. She lowered herself into the kitchen chair, staring at the pages while Noah slept peacefully, unaware that someone who had ignored his first smile was suddenly claiming to know what was best for him. Before panic could take hold, her phone vibrated. An unknown number appeared, but the message beneath it stopped her breathing. "Do not answer the petition alone." It was Harrison. Only seconds later, another message arrived. "Your fight is not against money, it is against strategy." Savannah looked from the legal papers to the simple white business card still resting on her counter. She wanted to reject his help, to prove she could carry every burden herself, yet deep inside she recognized something she had refused to admit. This battle had been planned long before Cole knocked on her door. As she reached for the card, another envelope slid beneath the apartment door. This one contained no return address, only a single photograph of Harrison leaving her building at midnight with one sentence printed beneath it in black ink. "Everyone has a weakness. We finally found his." Savannah stared at the anonymous photograph until her hands stopped trembling. The image had been taken from across the street, high enough to suggest a long-range camera, capturing Harrison leaving her building with perfect clarity. Beneath it, the printed sentence echoed in her mind like a warning. "Everyone has a weakness. We finally found his." This was no longer about a custody petition. Someone had been watching her apartment before that midnight knock, documenting movements, waiting for the right moment to turn a desperate mother into a bargaining chip. She instinctively lifted Noah from his bassinet and held him against her chest, listening to his calm breathing, while the silence inside the apartment suddenly felt occupied by unseen eyes. Across the river, Harrison stood inside a secure operations room hidden beneath the headquarters of Blake Holdings. Unlike the polished executive offices above, this room displayed live security feeds, encrypted communications, and digital maps covering every property connected to his legitimate businesses. A former intelligence analyst enlarged the anonymous photograph across a wall-sized screen. "The angle isn't random," she said. It was taken from an abandoned warehouse nearly 400 meters away using professional surveillance equipment. Another investigator added, "Our review found similar cameras positioned near 3 other locations linked to rival families." Harrison remained silent until the final report appeared. One vehicle seen leaving the warehouse belonged to a shell company, secretly controlled by a rival syndicate attempting to expand into his shipping routes. He slowly closed the file. "They're not interested in Savannah," he said quietly. "They're interested in what I'll do for Savannah." Meanwhile, Cole believed his plan was unfolding perfectly. He arrived at an upscale restaurant where Vanessa, a glamorous lifestyle influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers, waited beside a window overlooking Central Park. She smiled as he slid a folder across the table. Inside were carefully selected photographs of Savannah's apartment building, screenshots of community gossip, and one blurred image of the black armored Mercedes. "Don't accuse anyone directly," Cole instructed. "Just ask questions people already want answered." Vanessa studied the material before nodding. "People don't share facts," she replied confidently. "They share stories that make them feel clever." By sunset, her first video appeared online. She spoke gently about women who supposedly attracted powerful men through sympathy while never mentioning Savannah by name. She didn't have to. Viewers connected every dot themselves. Within hours, the comments multiplied into thousands, each one building a version of Savannah's life that had never existed. Savannah first discovered the campaign during her shift at the pharmacy when customers began recognizing the apartment in the background of the viral video. Whispers followed her through every aisle. Strangers looked at her with suspicion instead of compassion. Even those who meant well-asked questions that felt like accusations. When her break finally arrived, she locked herself inside the staff room and opened her phone. Hundreds of comments called her manipulative, calculating, and dishonest. Tears threatened to rise, but before they could, another notification appeared. It was not from Harrison. It came from Eleanor Price, the family law attorney whose name appeared beneath a simple message. "Delete nothing, answer nothing. Every lie they publish becomes evidence." Seconds later, Harrison sent only 4 words: "Truth never fears documentation." At evening, Savannah returned home expecting another sleepless night, but the apartment door was already unlocked from the inside. Every instinct screamed danger as she quietly stepped into the dark hallway holding Noah close. Nothing appeared disturbed until she reached the kitchen. The white business card Harrison had left on the counter was gone. In its place rested a black playing card bearing the image of a king with a single handwritten sentence across the center. "The next move belongs to us." Savannah did not scream. She simply stepped backwards, tightening her hold around Noah until she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her own. Every instinct told her someone had crossed the only boundary that still belonged to her. Nothing else inside the apartment had been touched. The hospital bills remained exactly where she had left them. The groceries Harrison had delivered were untouched. Only the white business card had disappeared, replaced by the black playing card lying neatly in the center of the kitchen counter. Whoever had entered wanted one thing above all else. They wanted her to know they could reach her whenever they wished. With trembling fingers, she photographed the card without touching it, then locked herself inside the bedroom before sending the image to Alina. Less than 30 seconds later, her phone rang. "Don't move it," Alina said firmly. "I'm notifying the police, and Mr. Blake's security team is already on the way." Savannah froze. How would they know? There was a brief silence before Alina answered. "Because someone disabled the silent alarm protecting your building exactly 4 minutes before you arrived home." 20 minutes later, 2 detectives were documenting fingerprints, while forensic photographers carefully collected the playing card using evidence bags. Harrison arrived last, not surrounded by an army of bodyguards, but accompanied by only one gray-haired security advisor carrying a sealed folder. He never crossed the police tape until a detective nodded permission. After quietly listening to the officers, he walked to the kitchen and studied the empty space where his business card had once rested. "This wasn't theft," he said calmly. "It was substitution." The detective raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Harrison looked at the black card inside the evidence bag. "Someone removed the only object connecting me to Savannah and replaced it with their own signature. This is communication." The room fell silent. Even the detectives recognized the unsettling confidence behind those words. Whoever had entered the apartment had not been searching for money or valuables. They had been announcing their presence. While investigators continued examining the apartment, another storm quietly formed across the city. Cole received an encrypted email from his attorney carrying the subject line, "Private Resolution Proposal." Attached was a carefully drafted agreement offering to withdraw the custody petition in exchange for a confidential financial settlement from an unnamed third party. No figure appeared anywhere in the document because the amount itself was never the point. The proposal had been written to tempt Harrison into naming his own price. Cole smiled as he imagined a billionaire mafia boss choosing reputation over conflict. "Everyone has a number," he muttered to himself, "even kings." He instructed his lawyer to deliver the proposal immediately, convinced that pressure always produced profit. That evening, Alina placed the settlement agreement on Savannah's kitchen table while Harrison quietly read every page without speaking. Noah slept peacefully beside them, unaware that adults were trying to assign a financial value to his future. When Harrison reached the final clause, his expression remained unchanged, but his eyes grew colder than Savannah had ever seen. "There it is," he said softly. "This was never about custody." Savannah looked between them. "What do you mean?" Harrison turned the document toward her, pointing to a single sentence requesting a confidential contribution from an unidentified benefactor in exchange for ending all litigation. "He isn't negotiating for parental rights," he said. "He's attempting organized extortion disguised as family law." Savannah felt physically sick. "He's selling his own son." Harrison closed the file and reached for his phone. He typed only 7 words before showing the screen to Savannah. "We decline." "We'll answer only in court." She nodded silently and he pressed send. Neither of them noticed that from the rooftop across the street, a camera lens captured the exact moment Harrison stood beside her kitchen table. Somewhere behind that lens, an unseen observer whispered into a radio, "Phase 1 failed. Begin Phase 2. Before sunrise, Harrison was already inside the secure intelligence floor beneath Blake Holdings. Unlike the polished executive offices above, this room existed for one purpose alone: separating truth from manipulation. Every wall displayed live security feeds, encrypted communications, financial records, and satellite maps stretching across New York. The photograph taken from the rooftop opposite Savannah's apartment filled the largest screen. Beside it appeared a second image recovered only hours earlier from a nearby traffic camera, then a third, then a fourth. The same dark utility van had appeared outside Savannah's building on 4 separate occasions over the previous 3 weeks, long before she had accidentally texted Harrison. He folded his hands quietly. "They weren't watching me," he said. "They were already watching her." The room fell completely silent. Someone had anticipated that Savannah would eventually become valuable to someone powerful. The question was how. While investigators expanded the timeline, a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected source. An anonymous encrypted file appeared inside Blake Holdings' legal evidence portal, accompanied by a single sentence. "Look at the deleted calendar entries." The cybersecurity team immediately isolated the upload, verified it contained no malicious code, and opened the files under forensic supervision. Hidden beneath apparently routine business appointments sat several erased meetings between Cole Bennett and a consulting company that officially specialized in reputation management. Unofficially, it had previously advised multiple organized crime figures on witness pressure, media influence, and financial coercion. The deleted notes contained one repeated phrase after every meeting: secure leverage before negotiation. Alina stared at the screen before quietly saying, "This custody case was designed months ago." Cole, however, remained convinced he controlled the board. Sitting inside his glass office overlooking Midtown, he rehearsed interview answers for investors while pretending nothing had changed. His assistant entered carrying fresh coffee but hesitated before speaking. "There's someone downstairs asking for you." Cole barely looked up. "Who?" She swallowed nervously. He wouldn't give a name. Irritated, Cole walked into the lobby expecting another journalist. Instead, an elderly man wearing an ordinary charcoal suit stood waiting beside the reception desk. There were no bodyguards, no expensive watch, nothing remarkable except the calm certainty in his eyes. "Mr. Bennett," the stranger said politely, handing over a sealed envelope, "my employer asked me to remind you that every negotiation leaves fingerprints." Before Cole could ask another question, the man turned, entered a waiting taxi, and disappeared into traffic. Inside the envelope lay nothing except a printed copy of his own deleted calendar appointments. For the first time since filing the custody petition, confidence abandoned him. At afternoon, Savannah met Alina inside a quiet conference room where stacks of organized evidence covered the table from end to end. She expected legal strategy. Instead, Alina played an audio recording recovered through lawful discovery from one of Cole's former consultants. The voices were unmistakable. Cole calmly discussed timing the custody petition alongside his upcoming investor presentations, explaining that appearing as a devoted father would strengthen confidence during negotiations. Then came the sentence that drained every remaining trace of warmth from the room. "If Blake wants peace," Cole had laughed, "he'll pay far more than the kid will ever cost me." Savannah closed her eyes, unable to believe the father of her child had reduced Noah to a bargaining figure in a business calculation. Tears threatened, but they never fell. Harrison quietly slid a box of tissues toward her without speaking. Sympathy was unnecessary. Truth had become stronger than comfort. As the meeting ended, Alina carefully placed every document into evidence folders bearing official chain of custody seals. "We don't need revenge," she said calmly. "We need credibility." Harrison nodded once, "And now we have it." Savannah finally understood what real power looked like. It was not armed convoys, expensive towers, or whispered reputations. It was the patience to let dishonest people document their own downfall. Just as they prepared to leave, the conference room television interrupted with breaking financial news. Cole Bennett's largest investor had unexpectedly postponed a multi-million-dollar funding announcement pending an internal ethics review. Harrison watched the screen for only a second before quietly saying, "Someone else has started asking the right questions." None of them noticed the hidden camera concealed inside the conference room smoke detector, transmitting every word to an unknown location across the city. Family Courthouse did not resemble the battlefield Savannah had imagined during countless sleepless nights. There were no television cameras waiting inside, no dramatic speeches echoing through marble halls, only fluorescent lights, quiet footsteps, and ordinary families carrying extraordinary burdens. She walked through the security checkpoint with Noah sleeping peacefully against her chest, his tiny fingers wrapped around the fabric of her coat. Every step reminded her why she was there. This was never about defeating Cole. It was about protecting the little boy who trusted her without question. Across the waiting area, Cole stood beside his attorney wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, greeting people with calm confidence. Beside him sat Vanessa, dressed carefully enough to appear compassionate instead of glamorous. They looked like people rehearsing a story. Savannah looked like someone living the truth. When the hearing began, the courtroom settled into complete silence. The judge reviewed the custody petition with measured patience before looking directly at Cole. "Mr. Bennett, you're requesting primary placement based upon concerns regarding the child's stability and the mother's financial circumstances." Cole rose confidently. "Yes, Your Honor. My only concern has always been my son's future." His voice carried just enough emotion to sound convincing. He spoke about secure housing, financial certainty, and opportunities he believed he could provide. Every sentence had clearly been practiced. When he finished, he glanced briefly toward Savannah, expecting fear. Instead, she remained calm, one hand resting gently on Noah's blanket. She had stopped worrying about appearances the moment she realized evidence speaks more clearly than performance. Alina stood without urgency and approached the bench carrying a carefully organized collection of indexed files. "Your Honor," she began evenly, "before discussing financial circumstances, we ask the court to examine the petitioner's conduct before these proceedings began." One by one she introduced authenticated records, temporary parental responsibility documents voluntarily signed by Cole months earlier, communication logs showing complete absence from medical appointments, unanswered messages concerning Noah's health, and documented evidence that he had provided neither consistent care nor financial support. The courtroom remained silent as each exhibit was admitted. Then Alina presented the recovered emails discussing investor optics, followed by the confidential settlement proposal requesting payment from an unnamed third party in exchange for withdrawing the custody action. Cole's attorney immediately objected, arguing relevance, but the judge calmly overruled the objection and continued reading. The silence that followed became heavier than any argument either lawyer could have delivered. Cole's confidence finally began to fracture when Alina requested permission to play a recorded conversation obtained through lawful discovery. His own voice filled the courtroom with chilling clarity. "If Blake wants peace, he'll pay far more than the kid will ever cost me." Nobody spoke while the recording ended. Even Vanessa slowly lowered her eyes. The judge removed her glasses and looked directly at Cole for several long seconds before speaking. "Mr. Bennett, the purpose of this court is to protect children, not facilitate financial leverage." The word struck harder than any accusation. Savannah closed her eyes briefly, not from relief but from sadness that Noah's father had reduced fatherhood to a negotiation strategy. Beside her, Noah continued sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that his future had just shifted forever. After reviewing the complete record, the judge delivered her decision with calm authority. Primary custody would remain with Savannah. Cole's request for primary placement was denied. Structured visitation would be considered only after a parental responsibility assessment, consistent involvement, and demonstrated commitment to the child's welfare. Child support was ordered immediately according to statutory requirements. Furthermore, the court directed that the settlement communications and related evidence be referred to the appropriate authorities for review regarding possible improper conduct connected to the litigation. There was no dramatic celebration. Savannah simply lowered her head and quietly thanked the court. As she stepped into the courthouse corridor, her phone vibrated once. The message came from Harrison, who had deliberately remained outside the courtroom to avoid influencing proceedings. It contained only one sentence: "Today the truth protected your son." Before she could reply, several black vehicles arrived outside the courthouse, but they did not belong to Harrison. Men wearing the insignia of the rival syndicate stepped out, their leader unfolding a sealed document before calmly asking, "Where can we find Cole Bennett? The commission has questions he can no longer avoid." The courthouse steps emptied slowly, carrying away lawyers, reporters, and families whose futures had just been rewritten by ordinary words spoken inside an ordinary courtroom. Savannah tightened the blanket around Noah as a cool afternoon breeze swept across the plaza. She expected relief to arrive like sunlight after a storm, but instead she felt something quieter: certainty. For the first time since the apartment had gone dark weeks earlier, nobody could question where her son belonged. She looked down at Noah sleeping peacefully against her shoulder and realized that the greatest victories rarely sounded dramatic. They sounded like a child breathing without fear. Across the street, Harrison watched from the back seat of a discreet black sedan rather than standing beside the courthouse entrance. He had deliberately refused to appear inside the hearing because this victory had to belong entirely to Savannah and the evidence she had protected with such determination. His phone vibrated almost immediately. One of his legal advisors forwarded a brief message from the family court portal confirming the judge's written order had already been uploaded. Another notification followed seconds later from the compliance department of one of his legitimate companies. Cole Bennett's proposed logistics partnership has been suspended pending governance review. Harrison closed the messages without satisfaction. Consequences were not trophies. They were simply the natural destination of documented choices. Inside a glass conference room overlooking Midtown, Cole faced a silence far more uncomfortable than any courtroom. The lead investors who had once praised his vision now sat studying printed copies of public filings and media reports. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody accused him of anything dramatic. Instead, they asked careful questions about judgment, disclosure, and credibility. One director finally folded the papers together and spoke with measured calm. "Our concern is not that you lost a custody application. Our concern is that internal communications suggest you viewed a family matter as a negotiating tool." Cole attempted to explain strategy, pressure, and misunderstanding, but every answer sounded weaker than the documents already lying on the table. By the end of the meeting, the investment committee voted to postpone further funding until an independent governance review was completed. As the directors quietly left the room, Cole found himself surrounded not by enemies, but by the consequences of his own decisions. Weeks passed without another anonymous envelope arriving beneath Savannah's door. The online rumors slowly disappeared beneath newer headlines, while the comments that had once judged her lost interest and moved elsewhere. She returned to work, collected Noah from childcare each evening, and gradually discovered that peace felt unfamiliar after months of constant fear. One afternoon, Alina invited her to lunch instead of another legal meeting. Over warm coffee and simple sandwiches, the attorney placed a brochure on the table. It advertised an evening certification program in community financial education and ethical communications. "You spent months surviving manipulation without becoming manipulative yourself," Alina said gently. "That experience has value. Don't let it become only pain." Savannah stared at the brochure for a long moment before quietly slipping it into her bag. Later that evening, Harrison stopped outside her apartment carrying nothing except 2 takeaway coffees and a folder no thicker than a notebook. There were no security vehicles visible, no display of influence, only the same calm presence that had first appeared with baby formula instead of cash. He handed her the folder. Inside was not a job offer, not a check, and not a contract. It contained information about scholarships, childcare assistance during evening classes, and community outreach programs supported by his charitable foundation. These aren't favors, he said quietly. They're opportunities. Whether you use them is entirely your decision. Savannah looked at him for several seconds before smiling for the first time in what felt like months. Thank you for remembering the difference. Harrison nodded once. It's the only difference that matters. As night settled over Queens, the lights inside apartment 3B remained warm and steady. Noah laughed from his blanket on the living room floor, while Savannah completed the application for the certification program she had once believed was beyond her reach. Across the city, hidden inside an encrypted server seized during an unrelated corporate investigation, forensic analysts uncovered a forgotten archive of deleted communications connected to Cole's former reputation consultants. Buried among thousands of recovered files was one encrypted document carrying a title that made the lead investigator stop reading and immediately reach for the telephone: Operation Midnight Formula. 1 year later, the lights inside apartment 3B had never gone out again. Savannah noticed that every evening when she unlocked the door after work, the quiet hum of the refrigerator no longer reminded her of fear. It reminded her of the night everything had changed because she had been brave enough to tell the truth to the wrong person. Noah, now taking confident little steps across the living room, laughed every time he managed to reach her before she could scoop him into her arms. The apartment was still modest, but it was no longer defined by survival. Every bill was paid on time. Every cupboard held food. Every corner carried the warmth of a home rebuilt through determination instead of desperation. Financial education program Alina had encouraged her to join had transformed far more than her career. Savannah graduated at the top of her class and accepted a position leading community outreach for one of the charitable initiatives funded through Blake Holdings' legitimate foundation. She spent her days helping struggling parents understand budgeting, financial abuse, debt recovery, and emergency planning so they would never have to face the kind of hopeless night she had endured. She never hid her past from them. Instead, she quietly reminded every parent who walked through her office that asking for help was never the same as surrendering dignity. Months later, she fulfilled another dream, opening a small neighborhood cafe that doubled as a free community resource center where single parents could receive financial guidance over coffee without embarrassment. Above the entrance hung a simple wooden sign that read, "The light stays on." Cole's future unfolded very differently. After the governance review concluded, his investors permanently withdrew their funding, his board removed him from day-to-day leadership, and several business relationships quietly dissolved. No criminal headlines followed him because there was no dramatic conspiracy to expose. Instead, documented facts slowly closed every important door. The attempted financial settlement, the custody strategy, the misleading investor communications, and the public narrative campaign became lasting questions about his judgment. He continued paying child support as ordered by the court, and gradually began attending the structured parenting program required before expanded visitation could even be considered. For the first time in his life, fatherhood demanded consistency instead of performance. Whether he would truly change remained uncertain, but the court ensured that Noah's well-being would never again depend upon promises alone. One crisp spring afternoon, Harrison invited Savannah to Central Park, the same quiet place where they had often walked after the legal battle ended. No reporters followed them. No security surrounded them beyond the discreet professionals watching from a respectful distance. Noah chased pigeons across the path, laughing so loudly that strangers smiled without knowing his story. Harrison handed Savannah her favorite oat milk coffee before speaking. "Do you remember what you told me the first night?" he asked. She smiled softly. "I told you I'd pay you back on Friday," he laughed quietly. "No, you told me you were a mother who made a mistake." Savannah looked toward her son before answering. "I was wrong," Harrison nodded. "You were never the mistake. The wrong number wasn't a mistake either. It was simply the moment two lives crossed at exactly the right time." He reached into his coat pocket and removed a small velvet box, placing it gently in her hand without opening it himself. "I'm not asking because you need me," he said. "I'm asking because you've shown me what strength looks like when nobody is watching. If your answer is no, nothing changes. If it's yes, we'll keep building what we've already started." Savannah opened the box to find a simple platinum ring, elegant enough to carry meaning without demanding attention. Tears filled her eyes, not because she had been rescued, but because she had finally found someone who understood that love was measured in consistency, respect, and quiet presence rather than grand gestures. "Yes," she whispered, "not because you saved me, but because you never tried to own me." Harrison smiled, slipped the ring onto her finger, and together they watched Noah run back toward them with outstretched arms. Weeks later, Alina called with one final piece of news. Forensic investigators had completed their review of the encrypted archive recovered during the corporate investigation. Among the files was the document labeled Operation Midnight Formula. Everyone had expected evidence of a sophisticated plot targeting Harrison or Savannah. Instead, the truth was almost unbelievable. The file revealed that the rival group had never arranged the wrong number message. They had merely begun watching after seeing Harrison's unexpected midnight visit. The text asking for $50 had truly been an accident. The single mistake that changed everything had been completely real. There had been no hidden plan, no elaborate manipulation, no invisible hand guiding fate. One exhausted mother had accidentally reached the only man powerful enough to recognize honesty before opportunity, and one disciplined mafia boss had chosen compassion over convenience. That simple decision redirected not only Savannah's future, but also the culture of his own empire, expanding its charitable work, strengthening its legitimate businesses, and quietly proving to everyone under his leadership that protecting the innocent was never a weakness. On the first anniversary of that dark night, Savannah closed the cafe just before sunset. She switched off the coffee machines, wiped the final table, and looked through the front window as warm light spilled onto the pavement outside. Harrison stood waiting with Noah beside him, both smiling as though they had been there forever. She locked the door, slipped her hand into his, and together they walked home beneath a city skyline that no longer felt frightening. 1 year earlier, she had stood in darkness, believing she had nothing left except a desperate message asking for $50. Now she carried something far more valuable than wealth. She carried peace, purpose, and a family built on trust rather than fear. The woman who once begged for baby formula in the dark now lived beneath lights she had earned herself, and she finally understood the lesson that had been waiting for her all along. Real power is not the ability to control another person's life. Real power is choosing to become the reason someone never has to face the darkness alone again.